The knock on the door came at 2 a.m., urgent and desperate. Chioma jolted awake, her heart pounding as she stumbled to their small apartment in Surulere to find her husband Colonel pacing outside like a caged animal. "They have everything," he said without preamble, his voice shaking. "Bank statements, transfer records, emails. Everything." Chioma's blood ran cold. She'd known this moment might come, had warned Colonel 2 years ago when he first told her about the creative accounting he was doing as education commissioner. But he'd been so confident, so sure he could cover his tracks. "How much?" she asked quietly. 50 million naira. That's what they can prove. Colonel's hands trembled as he ran them over his face. "But Chioma, there's more. Much more, if they keep digging." "How much more?" 200 million. Maybe more. I lost track." He laughed, a broken sound that made her stomach turn. "I was going to pay it back after I won the House of Assembly seat. Use my salary, my allowances, make it disappear over time." Chioma sank onto their worn couch, the weight of his confession crushing her. Colonel wasn't just facing embarrassment or the loss of his political dreams. He was facing serious prison time. 7 to 10 years minimum for embezzlement of this scale. "The election is in 2 months, Colonel continued, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "I'm leading in the polls. We're so close, Chioma, so close to everything we've worked for. The House of Assembly is just the beginning. In 5 years, I could be speaker. In 10, commissioner again, but with real power this time. Maybe even federal appointment. None of that matters if you're in prison." "Exactly." He knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. They were cold, clammy with fear sweat. "That's why I need you to listen to what I'm about to ask." The plan was insane. Suicidal. Chioma would confess to the embezzlement, claim she'd managed the education fund accounts, and stolen the money without Colonel's knowledge. He would testify against her, playing the role of the betrayed official who trusted his wife with sensitive responsibilities. "It's only 5 to 7 years for a first-time offender," Colonel said, his eyes pleading. "You'd be out before you're 35. And think about what we'd have waiting. I'll win the election. By the time you're released, I'll have the connections, the power to clear your name completely. We'll say it was a setup, political persecution. You'll be the wife of someone important. Chioma. We'll have everything. I'll be a convict. Temporarily. I promise you, I will make this right. But if I go to prison..." His voice cracked convincingly. "I won't survive, Chioma. My enemies will have me killed inside. You know how prison is in this country. But you're strong. You're a survivor. You could handle it." Chioma wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to tell him to face the consequences of his own actions. But she looked at her husband, the man she'd loved since university, the man whose dreams had become her dreams, and saw genuine terror in his eyes. "If I do this," she said slowly, "you promise you'll wait? You'll fight for me?" "I swear on my mother's grave." He pulled her into his arms, and she felt his tears wet against her neck. "I love you, Chioma. I'll wait forever if I have to. We're in this together. Always." She believed him. The next 3 weeks were a blur of code confessions and strategic planning. Colonel's lawyer, expensive, connected, utterly corrupt, walked her through exactly what to say, how to say it, which questions to answer and which to deflect. "Don't implicate anyone else," the lawyer instructed. "You acted alone. You saw an opportunity and took it. Show remorse but not weakness." What Chioma didn't know, what Colonel had carefully hidden from her, was the second deal he'd struck. 10 million naira, deposited into the private account of Justice Adeyemi, the judge assigned to her case. Not to dismiss the charges. That would be too obvious, but to ensure the maximum possible sentence. 15 years instead of 5 to 7. Long enough that Colonel could build his political career without the liability of an ex-convict wife. Long enough that people would forget she existed. The trial was a performance. Chioma played her part perfectly. Contrite, regretful, taking full responsibility. Colonel played his even better. The devoted husband betrayed by the woman he trusted most, his voice breaking as he testified about how she'd fooled him completely. "I gave her access to those accounts because I loved her," he told the court. eyes glistening with crocodile tears. I never imagined she would abuse that trust. I feel like I don't even know who she is anymore. The prosecution pushed for the maximum sentence, 15 years, citing the massive scale of theft and betrayal of public trust. Chioma's court-appointed lawyer made a half-hearted argument for leniency as a first-time offender. Justice Adeyemi deliberated for exactly 90 seconds. The court finds a defendant guilty of embezzlement of public funds. Given the severity of the crime and the damage to public institutions, I hereby sentence Chioma Okafor to 15 years imprisonment at Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison. The gavel struck. Chioma's world shattered. She turned to look at Kunnel in the gallery. For just a moment, his careful mask of grief slipped, and she saw something cold and calculating in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by a performance of devastated shock. "I'll wait for you," he mouthed silently. "I promise." As the guards led her away in chains, Chioma held on to those words like a lifeline. 15 years was impossibly long, but Kunnel would be waiting. He promised. They were in this together. She had no idea that the man she'd sacrificed everything for had already started planning his new life, one that didn't include a convict wife who knew too much. The prison van pulled away from the courthouse, carrying Chioma toward a hell she couldn't yet imagine. Behind her, Kunnel walked out to face the press, his expression perfectly calibrated to show a man betrayed but determined to serve his constituents despite personal tragedy. "This won't affect my commitment to the people of Lagos," he told the cameras. "If anything, this painful experience has shown me how important accountability and transparency are. I will fight corruption at every level." The reporters ate it up. His poll numbers, which had dipped with the scandal, began to climb again. The narrative was perfect. Dedicated public servant victimized by corrupt wife, channeling his pain into public service. 2 months later, Kunnel won his seat in the Lagos State House of Assembly by a comfortable margin. He celebrated at an expensive hotel in Victoria Island, surrounded by political allies and wealthy supporters. Chioma celebrated her first month of survival in Kirikiri by making it through a prison riot without getting stabbed. She huddled in her cell, listening to screams and violence echoing through the corridors, and told herself it would all be worth it. Kunnel would wait. He'd promised. She believed in promises then. She wouldn't for much longer. Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison was designed to break people, and it excelled at its purpose. Chioma learned this in her first week when a fight over a piece of soap left 3 women bleeding on the bathroom floor. She learned it again when the prison's electrical system failed for 2 weeks during August, turning their cells into suffocating ovens. She learned it every time the guards conducted random searches that were really just opportunities for theft and harassment. But Chioma was a survivor. She'd promised herself she would endure, would make it through to the other side where Kunnel was waiting, building their future. In the early months, she clung to that hope desperately. She wrote letters to Kunnel, dozens of them, describing her days, asking about his campaign, telling him she was staying strong. The letters went unanswered, but she told herself he was busy with the election, with setting up his new office, with all the important work that would eventually benefit them both. The election came and went. Kunnel won his seat in the Lagos State House of Assembly with 62% of the vote. Chioma heard about it from a guard who took pleasure in telling her, "Your husband is moving up in the world while you rot in here." She wrote to congratulate him. No response. 6 months became a year. A year became 2. The silence from Kunnel was deafening, but Chioma created explanations. He was being watched by his enemies. Couldn't risk being associated with a convict. He was working behind the scenes to build the connections he'd need to clear her name. He was protecting her by staying away. She taught herself to believe the lies. Prison had its own brutal hierarchy, and Chioma found her place in it by becoming useful. She'd been a teacher before her arrest, secondary school English and literature. In Kirikiri, she became the prison's unofficial educator, teaching women who'd never learned to read, helping others prepare for exams, running a small library from donated books. It gave her purpose. It kept her sane. "You're wasting your talent on us," her cellmate Amara said one afternoon as Chioma helped her write a letter to her children. Amara was serving 20 years for a murder her boyfriend had committed. She'd taken the blame to protect him. Chioma understood that kind of sacrifice too well. I'm not wasting anything, Chioma replied. We're all human beings. We all deserve a chance to learn. Even if we're criminals, especially if we're criminals, education is what separates another bad choice from a better future. She believed it, had to believe it, because if she stopped believing that people could change, could be redeemed, then what was the point of any of this? Year 3 brought a shift in the prison's power structure. A new warden arrived, rumored to be connected to the new federal minister of justice, a woman named Ngozi Okoro who'd built her reputation fighting corruption and advocating for prison reform. Minister Ngozi is going to tour the prisons, the warden announced one morning. Clean this place up. I don't want any complaints reaching her office. The tour happened 3 months later. Minister Ngozi Okoro was a commanding presence, mid-50s, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, with the kind of authority that came from years of fighting battles and winning most of them. She walked through Kurikiri like a general inspecting troops, asking questions, taking notes, her face showing carefully controlled outrage at the condition she witnessed. In the education block, she stopped to watch Chioma teaching a class of 15 women basic mathematics. Who organized this? Minister Ngozi asked the warden. That's prisoner 47623, Ma. Chioma Okafor, former teacher. She runs the education program voluntarily. Voluntarily? The minister's eyebrows rose. She's not paid? Not credited? No, Ma. Just something she does. After the class, Minister Ngozi requested a private conversation. They sat in the warden's office, while Chioma's heart hammered with anxiety. Had she done something wrong? Violated some regulation she didn't know about? Tell me about your case, Minister Ngozi said, without preamble. Chioma recited the story she'd told so many times it had worn grooves in her memory. Education fund. Embezzlement. 50 million naira. Full responsibility. 15 years. First-time offender? Yes, Ma. No violence involved? No, Ma. And you got 15 years? Minister Ngozi's expression sharpened. That's unusual. Maximum sentences are typically reserved for repeat offenders or cases involving violence. Who is your judge? Justice Adeyemi. Something flickered across the minister's face. Adeyemi, retired 2 years ago, correct? Bought a house in Abuja worth 50 million naira on a judge's salary. Yes, I remember him. Chioma's pulse quickened. Ma. Nothing. Just thinking. Minister Ngozi studied her carefully. Tell me, Mrs. Okafor, your husband is Colonel Okafor, the House Assembly member? The sound of his name after years of silence was like a physical blow. Yes, Ma. He never visits you. It wasn't a question, but Chioma answered anyway. He's very busy with his political work. Too busy to visit his wife in 5 years. It's complicated. I'm sure it is. Minister Ngozi stood. I'm going to have my office review your case, Mrs. Okafor. Something doesn't add up. A first-time offender with no violence getting maximum sentence from a corrupt judge, while her husband, who is in charge of the same education fund, walks free and builds a political career. Hope, dangerous and painful, sparked in Chioma's chest. Ma, I confessed. I took responsibility. I know what you did. I'm questioning why you did it. And more importantly, I'm questioning whether justice was actually served or just purchased. The investigation took 3 months. Minister Ngozi's team was thorough. Bank records, trial transcripts, witness interviews, financial audits. They discovered things Chioma had never known. The 10 million naira deposited into Justice Adeyemi's account 3 days after sentencing. The shell companies that had actually received the embezzled funds, all registered to Colonel's cousins and business associates. The original embezzlement totaling not 50 but 200 million naira, most of it still hidden in offshore accounts. Most damning, evidence that Chioma had never had signatory authority over the education fund accounts. She couldn't have embezzled the money even if she wanted to. Only Colonel, as commissioner, had that access. On a Tuesday morning in her 5th year of imprisonment, the warden came to Chioma's cell with an expression she couldn't read. Pack your things. You're being released. Chioma thought she'd misheard. What? Ministerial order. Your conviction is under review for judicial misconduct. You're being released pending investigation. He handed her a manila envelope. There's also this. It was delivered this morning. Inside the envelope, divorce papers. Filed and finalized 3 months ago while she'd been locked away, unable to contest or even respond. Petitioner, Colonel Okafor, member of the Lagos State House of Assembly. Grounds: irreconcilable differences and reputational incompatibility with convicted felon. Attached was a newspaper clipping. The headline made her knees buckle. Assemblymember Colonel Okafor weds beauty Queen Adiz Nwosu in lavish ceremony. The photo showed Colonel, prosperous and smiling, beside a stunning woman in an elaborate wedding dress. The caption noted it had been taken 6 months ago, while Chioma had been teaching women to read in a prison cell. Believing he was waiting for her, Kano had been planning a wedding. She walked out of Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison on September 14th, exactly 5 years after entering. No Kano waiting to embrace her. No tearful reunion. Just a lawyer she'd never met, holding divorce papers and a check for 50,000 Nigerian nairas. Transitional support from her ex-husband's legal team. Chioma stood on the street outside the prison, free but utterly destroyed, and realized a truth she'd been too blind to see. Kano had never planned to wait. He'd planned to bury her alive in Kirikiri, and only Minister Ngozi's investigation had pulled her back from grave. Wait, she just walked out of prison after 5 years to find her husband married to someone else, and he divorced her while she was locked up. If you're furious right now, smash that like button. Subscribe to Africantales by Zion, because the next chapter shows what happens when a woman who sacrificed everything decides to make him pay. Comment below. Would you forgive him or seek revenge? What would you do if you were Chioma? Hit that notification bell. Her comeback is about to be brutal. Chioma's mother lived in a one-room apartment in Ajigunle, barely scraping by on her pension. When Chioma appeared at her door, thin, wearing prison-issue clothes that hung on her frame, carrying everything she owned in a small bag, her mother's face showed no joy, only shame. You should have stayed away, Mama said, but she let her in anyway. The neighborhood hadn't changed, but Chioma had. She noticed security cameras on corners that hadn't been there before. The way people looked at her with a mixture of pity and suspicion. Ex-convict. Criminal. The labels stuck to her like tar. Finding work was impossible. Every application asked about criminal history. Every interview ended when her record came up. Teacher? We can't have someone with your background around children. Shop assistant? Our insurance won't cover convicted felons. Even cleaning jobs turned her away. Meanwhile, Kano's face was everywhere. On billboards advertising government programs. On television, giving speeches about accountability and good governance. In newspapers, praise as a rising star in Lagos politics. She watched one of his interviews from her mother's small television. Her hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood. Family values are very important to me, Kano told the smiling interviewer. My wife Adiz and I are expecting our first child, and I want to build a Lagos where all families can thrive. Your wife Adiz, as if Chioma had never existed. I did try to help my ex-wife, Kano continued when the interviewer delicately brought up his past. After her conviction, I provided legal support, visited when I could, but ultimately, she needed to accept responsibility for her actions. I couldn't enable her denial forever. Lies. All lies. He'd never visited, never sent money, never provided anything except divorce papers. Chioma threw a cup at the television. It shattered against the screen, spider-webbing the glass. That's enough, her mother shouted. You think breaking my television will fix your life? You made your choice, Chioma. You stole money. You went to prison. You have to live with it. I didn't steal anything. Kano is a respected assembly member. You are a convicted criminal. Who do you think people will believe? The answer was obvious. No one would believe her. She had no proof, no evidence, no credibility. Just the word of an ex-convict against a politician's careful lies. She was powerless. The message came 3 days later. A number she didn't recognize. A text that changed everything. Mrs. Okafor, This is Minister Ngozi Okoro's office. The minister requests a meeting. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Ministry of Justice. Please confirm attendance. Chioma stared at the message for a long time before responding. I'll be there. The Ministry of Justice building in Abuja was everything Kirikiri wasn't: clean, organized, modern. Chioma felt out of place in her second-hand clothes, too aware of how she must look to the well-dressed staff moving through the corridors. Minister Ngozi met her in a private office, closing the door firmly. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Okafor. Or should I say Ms. Okafor now? Chioma is fine. Chioma, then. Minister Ngozi gestured to a chair. I've spent the last 3 months investigating your case. I need you to understand. I don't believe you committed that crime alone. I don't believe you committed it at all. Hope and fear warred in Chioma's chest. The evidence was manufactured. Your confession was coerced. And your ex-husband. Minister Ngozi pulled out a thick folder. Your ex-husband is neck-deep in corruption. The original embezzlement wasn't $50 million. It was $200 million. Most of it is still hidden in offshore accounts and shell companies. He's been using his political position to launder money and pay off officials for 5 years. Chioma's hand shook. You can prove this? I can prove some of it. Enough to open a formal investigation. But Colonel is smart. He's covered his tracks well. What I need... Minister Ngozi leaned forward. What I need is someone who knows him. Someone who understands how he thinks, where he'd hide evidence. Someone with motivation to see him pay for his crimes. You want me to help you destroy him. I want you to help me deliver justice. There's a difference. Minister Ngozi's expression softened. I know what he did to you, Chioma. Not just the prison time, that's obvious. But the betrayal. Marrying someone else while you rotted away for his crimes. Divorcing you like you were trash to be disposed of. Using you and throwing you away. Tears burned in Chioma's eyes. Why are you doing this? Why do you care? Because I've seen too many women destroyed by men who face no consequences. Because I've seen too many powerful people buy their way out of justice. And because... Minister Ngozi paused. Because when I was your age, a man I loved convinced me to lie for him. It cost me 3 years of my career and nearly destroyed my reputation. He went on to become a senator. I learned then that the only way to stop men like that is to make them face what they've done. Chioma wiped her eyes. What do you need me to do? They worked for weeks, building the case piece by piece. Bank records that showed the scale of the embezzlement. Testimony from former education ministry staff about who actually controlled the accounts. Evidence of the bribed judges, suspicious wealth. But they needed something definitive. Something that would bypass Colonel's lawyers and political connections and force accountability. He has to have kept records. Minister Ngozi said during one of their strategy sessions. Men like him always do. Insurance, in case someone tries to betray him. Blackmail material. A way to drag others down if he falls. Chioma thought about it. Colonel had always been paranoid, always planning for betrayal. During their marriage, he'd kept a personal laptop, password protected, obsessively guarded. He called it his insurance policy. He had a laptop, she said slowly. Personal, not work-related. He never let me touch it. Said it contained sensitive political information. Where is it now? I don't know, but... Chioma remembered something. Colonel never threw away anything important. He was paranoid about people finding things in his trash. He rented a storage unit in Lekki under his cousin's name. Kept old documents, hard drives, anything he thought he might need someday. Minister Ngozi's eyes lit up. Can you find it? Maybe. I remember the facility. And Colonel... Chioma smiled bitterly. Colonel always used the same password variations. His mother's name and her birth date. He thought he was being clever, changing the order, but the elements were always the same. Finding the storage unit took 2 weeks of searching and some creative use of Minister Ngozi's federal authority. When they finally located it, Unit 247 at a facility in Lekki Phase 1, Chioma's heart nearly stopped. The unit was small, filled with boxes of old documents and electronics. And there, in a locked case in the back corner, was the laptop. It took Chioma 3 tries to crack the password. Adana 1967, his mother's name, birth year. The laptop came to life, and what they found inside was more damning than they dared hope. Spreadsheets detailing every naira of the embezzlement, emails coordinating the offshore accounts, scanned documents showing the payment to Justice Adeyemi, communications with security consultants, mercenaries hired to intimidate witnesses and eliminate threats. Most devastating were emails to Adiz dating back 6 years. He'd been having an affair the entire time he was married to Chioma, planning to replace her, joking with his mistress about getting rid of the dead weight. And there were messages about Chioma specifically, plans to have her killed in prison if she ever became a problem, discussions about how to frame the investigation to make her look maximally guilty, his words about her, cold and clinical. She's useful for now, but she won't last in Kirikiri. Problem will solve itself. Chioma read them with trembling hands, each word confirmation of betrayal, so deep it carved out her insides. "We have him," Minister Ngozi said quietly. "This is everything we need." Before they could move forward, Chioma's phone rang. Unknown number. "Don't answer," Minister Ngozi warned. But Chioma answered anyway. The voice on the other end was female, young, frightened. "Is this Chioma Okafor? Colonel's ex-wife." "Who is this?" "Adiz. His current wife." A pause and whispered, "I need help. He's going to kill me." "No way." Colonel's new wife is calling Chioma for help, and they found evidence of everything. The embezzlement, the bribes, the murder plots. If your heart is racing right now, smash that like button. Subscribe to Africantales by Zion, because the next chapter shows what happens when the hunter becomes a hunted. Comment. Should Chioma help the woman who replaced her? What would you do? Hit that notification bell. Colonel's about to learn you can't bury the truth forever. Adiz Nwosokfor sat across from Chioma in a small hotel room that Minister Ngozi had secured, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. Up close, she looked nothing like the radiant beauty from the wedding photos. Her eyes were shadowed with fear, and there was a fresh bruise on her wrist that her expensive jewelry didn't quite hide. "Thank you for meeting me," Adiz said quietly. "I know I'm the last person you want to see." Chioma studied the woman who'd taken her place. "Why did you call me?" "Because you're the only person who understands what he is. The only person who survived him." Adiz's voice cracked. "I'm 7 months pregnant, and he's already planning how to get rid of me." "What makes you think that?" Adiz pulled out her phone, hands shaking as she opened a voice recording. Colonel's voice filled the room, caught in what sounded like a phone conversation. "Problem is the pregnancy. Can't divorce a pregnant woman. Looks terrible politically. But after the baby comes, we'll handle it. Accident, maybe. Postpartum depression, leading to suicide. Public sympathy for the grieving father. Move on in a year or two." Chioma felt sick. Minister Ngozi, who'd been standing by the window, moved closer. "How did you get this?" the minister asked. "I've been recording his calls for 3 months. Ever since I found out about his first wife. About you." Adiz looked at Chioma. "He told me you were a criminal who betrayed him, that he'd tried to help you, but you were beyond redemption. Then I met someone who'd known you both before, and they told me the truth, that you went to prison for him. You knew and you stayed?" "I was already pregnant, already married, and I was scared." Tears spilled down Adiz's perfect makeup. "I thought if I was a good wife, if I gave him what he wanted, I'd be safe. But then I heard him on the phone, talking about me like I was a problem to solve, and I realized I'm not his wife. I'm his current project. And when the project is done, he'll dispose of you," Minister Ngozi finished, "like he disposed of Chioma. I have more recordings. Conversations about bribes, about shell companies, about paying off officials. I recorded everything I could find." Adiz's voice turned desperate. "I'll testify against him. I'll give you everything. Just please, help me get out safely." Chioma looked at the woman who should have been her enemy and saw only another victim of Colonel's manipulation. "Where are you staying?" "At the house. He doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm at the doctor." "You can't go back," Minister Ngozi said firmly. If he suspects you're cooperating with us, you're in immediate danger. But my things, my documents, we'll get them. But right now, we need to get you somewhere safe. They moved Adiz to a secure location, a government safe house where she'd be protected until the trial. She brought her recordings, her testimony, and her fear. But she also brought something else. Hope that maybe, finally, Kunal would face consequences. That night, Chioma stayed at her mother's apartment, going over the evidence they'd compiled. The laptop files, the bank records, Adiz's recordings. They had enough to destroy Kunal completely. She was so focused on the documents that she almost didn't hear the window breaking. Two men came through fast, moving with the practiced efficiency of professionals. Chioma barely had time to scream before one of them grabbed her, a hand clamped over her mouth. "Where's the laptop?" he hissed. She fought, kicking and twisting. Her mother appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with terror. "Run, Mama!" Chioma managed to shout before the second man moved toward her mother. What saved them was a neighbor, a retired police officer, who heard the commotion and came bursting to the door with his old service weapon. The two attackers fled to a window they'd entered, disappearing into the Adjugunal night. Police came. Statements were taken. But Chioma knew the truth. This was Kunal's work. Somehow, he'd found out about the laptop, about the investigation, and he'd sent people to silence her permanently. "You can't stay here," the neighbor told her as paramedics treated her mother's injuries, a twisted ankle from falling, bruises from being shoved aside. "They'll come back, next time with more men." Minister Ngozi arrived within the hour, her face grim. "Pack what you need. You're both coming with me. Now!" At the ministry's secure facility, surrounded by armed guards, Chioma finally let herself break down. She'd been strong for 5 years in prison, strong through the betrayal, strong through building the case. But this, knowing Kunal had sent men to kill her, shattered the last of her composure. "He's not going to stop," she sobbed. "Even if we arrest him, he has connections. Money. He'll find a way." "Not if we move first," Minister Ngozi said. "That attack was his mistake. He's scared, which means he knows we're close. We move now, before he can cover his tracks any further." The evidence was overwhelming. The laptop files alone were enough to prove embezzlement and judicial bribery. Add Adiz's recordings, conversations about money laundering, political payoffs, and plans to handle problems that sounded distinctly like murder for hire, and they had a case that even Kunal's expensive lawyers couldn't dismiss. But Minister Ngozi wanted more. She wanted the money. "The $200 million he stole is still out there, hidden in offshore accounts in shell companies," she explained. "If we can trace it, freeze it, we can recover funds for the education ministry. Make this about more than just Kunal's crimes. Make it about recovering what was stolen from the people." Chioma remembered something. His cousin, Emeka. Kunal always said Emeka was his financial advisor. "I saw documents once years ago. Shell companies registered in Emeka's name. Can you remember which companies?" "Some of them. Adana Holdings, named after his mother. Sunrise Investments. There were others, but those two I'm sure about." It took Minister Ngozi's Financial Crimes Unit a week to trace the money. The shell companies led to offshore accounts in Seychelles and Mauritius. The accounts held 187 million Nigerian nairas of the original 200 million Nigerian nairas. Kunal had been slowly spending it on his political career and lavish lifestyle, but the bulk remained hidden, waiting. "We freeze the accounts and we have him," Minister Ngozi said. "No money to pay lawyers. No money to bribe officials. No escape route." The morning they were set to execute the arrests, Adiz called in a panic. "He knows. I don't know how, but he knows. He called me at the safe house. How did he even get this number? He said if I testify against him, he'll make sure I never see my baby. That he has judges who'll declare me unfit. That he'll bury me like he buried you. He's bluffing," Minister Ngozi assured her. "He has no power here." But Kunal had one more card to play. That afternoon, news broke across every major outlet. Assemblymember Kunal Okafor accuses Minister of Justice of political persecution. In a press conference, Connell stood with his lawyers and several other assembly members, looking every inch the wrong public servant. Minister Okoro has orchestrated a politically motivated witch hunt against me, he declared, voice ringing with false righteousness. Using my ex-wife, a convicted felon with an obvious grudge, and my estranged wife who is suffering from severe postpartum psychosis, the minister is attempting to destroy my reputation and my career. This is not justice. This is persecution. The press ate it up. Questions flew about Minister Ngozi's methods, about whether she'd overstep her authority, about political vendettas. Chioma watched the press conference from the safe house, feeling hope drain away. Kano had done again, twisted the narrative, played the victim, made himself untouchable. He's going to win, she said flatly. He always wins. Minister Ngozi's phone rang. She answered, listened, and a slow smile spread across her face. Not this time, she said. That was my financial crimes unit. We've frozen all the offshore accounts, and the Attorney General just authorized the arrest warrants. Federal agents are moving on his house right now. On television, Kano's press conference was interrupted by a commotion at the back of the room. Federal agents in bulletproof vests moved through the crowd. Kano Okafor, the lead agent, announced, "You are under arrest for embezzlement of public funds, bribery of judicial officials, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder." Kano's face went white. The cameras captured everything. The handcuffs being applied. The perp walked past shocked reporters. The moment his carefully constructed world collapsed. Chioma watched it happen and felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just a hollow acknowledgement that finally, there will be consequences. Minister Ngozi put a hand on her shoulder. The trial starts in 6 weeks. Are you ready to testify? Chioma thought about 5 years in hell, about divorce papers and tabloid weddings, about assassination attempts and a husband who'd planned to have her killed. Yes, she said, I'm ready. Outside, in a secure federal facility, Kano sat in a cell for the first time in his life. The same kind of cell Chioma had endured for 5 years. He'd sent her to prison expecting her to break. Instead, she'd emerged strong enough to send him there instead. Justice, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Hold on. Kano just got arrested on live TV in the middle of his own press conference. After sending hitmen to kill Chioma? If you're screaming yes, right now, smash that like button. Subscribe to Africantales by Zion because the final chapter shows his trial and the justice he deserves. Comment. What sentence would you give him? Hit that notification bell. The courtroom showdown is about to be epic. The Federal High Court in Lagos had never seen anything like it. The public gallery was packed, journalists fighting for seats, the entire nation watching as one of Lagos State's rising political stars faced justice for crimes he'd hidden for 7 years. Chioma sat in the witness section, wearing a simple but dignified outfit that Minister Ngozi had helped her choose. Across the courtroom, Kano sat with his legal team, 3 of the most expensive lawyers in Nigeria. He wouldn't look at her. The charges read like a catalog of corruption: embezzlement of 200 million Nigerian nairas from the Lagos State Education Fund, bribery of Justice Adeyemi to secure an unjust sentence, money laundering through offshore accounts, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder of Chioma Okafor. Kano pleaded not guilty to everything. His defense strategy was predictable: discredit the witnesses, claim political persecution, paint himself as a victim of vindictive ex-wives and overreaching government officials. My client is a dedicated public servant, his lead lawyer argued during opening statements, being destroyed by a coalition of people with obvious biases. His ex-wife, who went to prison for crimes she committed and now seeks revenge. His estranged wife, suffering from documented mental health issues. And a minister of justice with a well-known crusade against successful male politicians. It might have worked if the evidence wasn't so overwhelming. The prosecution presented the laptop first, its contents projected on screens for the entire courtroom to see. Emails detailing the embezzlement scheme, spreadsheets tracking the laundered money, messages to Adiz showing the affair had started before Kano was even married to Chioma. Most damning, the emails discussing Chioma's fate. She'll take the fall gracefully, Kano had written to his lawyer 7 years ago. She loves me too much to refuse. And once she's inside, the problem solves itself. Kirikiri has a way of eliminating inconvenient people. The courtroom was silent as those words hung in the air. Then came the financial evidence. The prosecution's forensic accountant walked through the money trail. Nigerian naira 200 million stolen from the education fund, parceled through shell companies, hidden in offshore accounts, the frozen accounts in Seychelles and Mauritius, the paper trail that led directly back to Kunnel. The defendant claims he was unaware of the embezzlement, the prosecutor said, but he was the sole signatory on the education fund accounts. He established the shell companies. He controlled the offshore accounts. This wasn't opportunistic theft. It was systematic looting of public funds. On day 4, Adiz testified. She walked to the witness stand 7 months pregnant, her hands shaking but her voice steady. Kunnel finally looked up, his expression a mixture of rage and something that might have been fear. Mrs. Nwosukafor, the prosecutor began. How long were you in a relationship with the defendant before his divorce from his first wife? 6 years. We started the affair in 2018, while he was still married to Chioma. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. And did the defendant discuss his plans regarding his first wife? Yes. He told me that Chioma was taking care of a legal problem for him, and once she was out of the way, we could be together. He said she was going to prison for 7 years maximum, and by the time she got out, he'd have enough political power to keep her quiet. Did he mention bribing the judge? Yes. He bragged about it. Said he'd paid Justice Adeyemi 10 million naira to give her 15 years instead of 7. He laughed about it. Said Chioma was so devoted she'd probably die in prison thinking he still loved her. Kunnel's lawyers objected strenuously, but Adiz had recordings. The courtroom listened to Kunnel's voice discussing the bribe, planning Chioma's extended imprisonment, mocking her devotion. And when did you become aware of the defendant's plans regarding your safety? The prosecutor continued. Adiz's voice broke. 3 months ago, I found files on his computer. Plans to stage my suicide after the baby was born. He'd already drafted the media statement. Grieving father, postpartum depression, tragic loss. He was planning to kill me and use my death for political sympathy. She played the recording she'd made. Kunnel's voice casually discussing her murder like it was a business transaction. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Adiz crying. On day 7, Chioma took the stand. She prepared for this moment, rehearsed her testimony with Minister Ngozi and the prosecutors. But nothing could have prepared her for the feeling of looking at Kunnel from that witness box, telling the truth about what he'd done. Mrs. Okafor, the prosecutor began gently, can you describe the circumstances that led to your confession 7 years ago? Chioma told the story. All of it. The late-night conversation, where Kunnel begged her to take the fall. His promises to wait for her, to clear her name, to build their future together. Her decision to sacrifice her freedom because she loved him and believed his lies. Did you actually commit the embezzlement you confessed to? No, I never had access to those accounts. I never stole anything. I confess because Kunnel told me it was the only way to save both of us. And when did you realize he betrayed you? When I walked out of prison after 5 years and found out he divorced me, married someone else, and built a life that erased me completely. When I realized every promise was a lie designed to keep me quiet while I suffered. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Who would have believed me? I was a convicted felon. He was a respected assembly member. I had no proof, no evidence, no voice. I was exactly where he wanted me, powerless. Kunnel's lawyers attacked her credibility during cross-examination. They brought up her conviction, her imprisonment, her obvious bias against their client. Isn't it true, Mrs. Okafor, that you're only here because you want revenge against a man who moved on with his life while you paid for your crimes? Chioma looked directly at Kunnel. I'm here because I want justice for crimes he committed. Against me. Against the education fund. Against every child in Lagos whose education suffered because he stole their money. If that's revenge, then yes, I want revenge. The retired Justice Adeyemi testified next, granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation. He confirmed the bribe, 10 million naira, to give Chioma, the maximum sentence. Confirmed Cunnell had explicitly asked for 15 years to make sure she's not a problem when she gets out. The evidence was insurmountable. The defense had no credible rebuttal, only attacks on the character of witnesses who were all telling the same consistent story, backed by documents and recordings. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Cunnell showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but Chioma saw his hands clench the table hard enough that his knuckles went white. At sentencing, the judge, a stern woman who'd reviewed every piece of evidence meticulously, addressed Cunnell directly. "You are a man who weaponized love and trust to destroy an innocent woman's life. You sent her to prison for your crimes, bribed officials to extend her suffering, and planned her murder when she threatened your carefully constructed lies. You embezzled money meant to educate children. You corrupted the justice system, and you did it all without remorse." She paused, looking down at her notes. "The court sentences you to 25 years in Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison for the embezzlement charges, to run consecutively with 15 years for judicial corruption and 10 years for conspiracy to commit murder. Total sentence, 50 years, with eligibility for parole after serving a minimum of 25 years. The courtroom erupted. Cunnell's lawyers immediately filed notice of appeal, but it was over. Chioma watched his guards let him away in chains, the same chain she'd worn 7 years ago. As he passed the gallery, Cunnell looked directly at her for the first time since the trial began. His expression was pure hatred. "This isn't over," he mouthed silently. Chioma held his gaze, unflinching. "Yes, it is." The judge also issued additional orders. Chioma's original conviction was overturned and expunged completely. All of Cunnell's assets, determined to be proceeds of corruption, were seized, totaling approximately 500 million Nigerian nairas when properties, accounts, and investments were calculated. As the victim of his crimes, Chioma was awarded 200 million Nigerian nairas in restitution. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Minister Ngozi stood with Chioma, making a brief statement. "Today's verdict sends a clear message. No one is above the law. Not assembly members, not politicians, not anyone who believes their power makes them untouchable. I'm proud to have worked with Mrs. Chioma Okafor, whose courage in the face of unimaginable betrayal has led to justice not just for her, but for all of Lagos." Chioma added her own words. "I spent 5 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit, sacrificing my freedom for a man who planned to discard me. But I survived. And to every woman who's been used, betrayed, or discarded by someone they loved, survive. Get strong. And when the time comes, make sure they face what they've done." The crowd applauded. Chioma allowed herself a small smile. 3 months later, Minister Ngozi called Chioma to her office. "I have a position opening in my ministry," she said without preamble. "Director of Prison Reform and Wrongful Conviction Review. It's yours if you want it." "Why me?" "Because you've lived it. You know what it's like inside those walls. You know how the system fails people, especially women. And you have the courage to fight to fix it." Minister Ngozi smiled. "Plus, you already started doing the work in Kirikiri. Might as well make it official." Chioma accepted. Adiz gave birth to a healthy daughter 3 weeks later. She'd started a foundation for women escaping abusive relationships, using her own story to help others recognize the warning signs. "We should do something together," Adiz said over coffee, her baby sleeping peacefully in a carrier. "Your prison reform work and my foundation. There are so many women trapped in the system because of men like Cunnell." "I'd like that," Chioma said. They became friends, unlikely allies bound by shared trauma and shared survival. 2 women who both loved the same monster, and both found the strength to destroy him. 2 years later, Chioma stood outside Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison. But this time she wasn't arriving as a prisoner. She was there as a director of prison reform, reviewing cases of inmates who might have been unjustly convicted. Among the files on her desk was one that made her pause. Colonel Okafor, inmate 89234. He'd written requesting a visit from her. The letter was carefully composed, full of apologies and claims of remorse. He wanted to make amends and seek forgiveness. Chioma read it once, then filed away unanswered. A colleague asked if she'd visit him. No, Chioma said simply. He told me he'd wait for me. He wanted me to spend years hoping, believing, suffering in anticipation of a reunion that would never come. Now, he can wait for me. He can hope I'll show up, believe I might forgive him, suffer in anticipation of mercy he'll never receive. How long will you make him wait? Chioma smiled. A real smile, the first genuinely happy expression she'd worn in years. 25 years minimum. Maybe longer. Maybe forever. She had a life to live now. A purpose. Financial security. Respect. Friends. The truth on her side and justice served. Kano had taken 5 years of her life. She'd taken his freedom, his reputation, his future. The scales finally were balanced. And Chioma Okafor, survivor, advocate, voice of the voiceless, was free in every way that mattered. Justice served. Kano got 50 years in the same prison he sent her to, and Chioma is now the director helping other women. If you're crying happy tears right now, smash that like button. Subscribe to Africantales by Zion for more stories where the betrayed become the victorious. Comment, was 50 years enough punishment? What was the most satisfying moment for you? Share this with someone who needs to know that karma is real. Hit that notification bell for more powerful African tales of justice and redemption.